Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Community Unitarian Universalist Church here in Plano, Texas. My name is Reverend Dr. Aya Dolm. I am the minister of this congregation, and I'm so glad to see all of you here. I welcome you to here in person, and if you're joining us online, I welcome this morning. Not sure if you know, but every single Sunday morning we have about 10 to 11 people watching us online, joining our service in real time, basically. So we're more than what we see here together. This congregation strives to be an inclusive congregation. We welcome all who come through our doors. We welcome all of our people with all of their identities, all the complexities and situations that we bring. We welcome your whole self, even if that whole self is not fully assembled yet. Because we recognize that we are all work in progress. We all grow. We all learn new things. We all continue to develop our skills and abilities and understandings. And we come together here as a community so that we can draw on our courage to face what comes our way. Sometimes there are things that we are facing that are scarier than others. And when we anticipate some dangerous and threatening situations, we may feel ourselves overcome with fear. One thing that could help in those moments is courage. So that's today. We will think about, contemplate what it takes to cultivate courage, to grow courage in ourselves, to practice courage, so that we can move through our fears and not let them paralyze us. We will draw on our experiences and practice it today as well. You will hear about it later, just in a minute, what I mean by this. But the practice helps us to remind the body and our whole self how to do things. We will also look at some heroes who have something to teach us about courage. And hopefully we'll just be on the way to build more courage among us. Wherever you are on your journey, I'm glad you are here today. Our call to worship comes from the words written by Lynn Cox, invitation to join the journey. Come, you accidental pilgrims, you who find yourself on a journey of surprise and wonder. Come, you who emerge into this place as an act of liberation. Come, you who seek a life of mindfulness and a place to test your thoughts. Come, you who bring hearts of all kinds, heavy hearts, rusty hearts, hearts broken open in revelation, hearts full of love to share. Come, you who seek courage, and you who have more courage than you realize. Come, you who stand behind a curtain, gathering up the resources to claim your truth. Come, you who have been in a bubble, you who are poised for transformation. We begin our story again, gathering courage, love, mindfulness, and a sense of purpose. We gather as people of all ages, of different abilities, different backgrounds, and different perspectives. We share a covenant, a direction for our shared journey, and a commitment to encourage and challenge one another to spiritual growth. This path will ask much from us. Let us move forward with love. Let us move forward with appreciation for one another. Let us move forward knowing we are not alone. Whoever you are, whatever your gifts, you are welcome to join this journey.
We begin, as always, by lighting our chalice. It's a symbol both of the heritage of our past and the light of hope in our church today. Our chalice this morning will be lit by Ann Smith.
Today's chalice lighting is by Beth Zwinicki, pronounce it? May this flame, symbol of transformation since time began, fire our curiosity, strengthen our wills, and sustain our courage as we seek what is good within and around us.
As Unitarian Universalists, we do not have to all recite the Apostles' Creed, make a confession of faith, promise to all believe the same thing. And that's a good thing. Instead, what binds us is a covenant. It's not just a promise, it's a sacred kind of promise. It's one that we make with each other about the way that we're going to walk together as a community, as a congregation. So every week we say this together to remind us of this sacred promise. Please join me as let's say this covenant together. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another.
So tomorrow, early voting begins here in Texas. This election cycle seems very different than other ones. Many of us are overcome with fear and anxiety in anticipation of the results and what may come after. This country is so divided that regardless of the outcome, half the country will be grieving and worried about their future. So much is on the line during these elections. The questions whether democracy will survive, whether we will continue to have the freedoms and human rights, and whether human decency will prevail, or whether we will fall deeper into living with more violence and threats to our well-being. Some of these possibilities are pretty scary. Some of us might be wondering and seeking how to prepare ourselves for the after season. While grudgingly imagining the worst case scenario, I find myself thinking about the times in history that showed how other people were able to get through time periods and political regimes that were difficult, that involved autocratic regimes or policies built on fear and violence and threats. For United States, this is not the first time to be on the verge of a dreadful and difficult regime. During McCarthy era, there was a time period known as the Second Red Scare, which was a political repression and persecution of left-wing persons in a campaign spreading fear of communist and Soviet influence on American institutions and of Soviet espionage in the United States during the late 40s through the 50s. This was a time when suspicions were often given credence despite inconclusive and questionable evidence, and the level of threat posed by a person's real or supposed leftist associations and beliefs were often exaggerated. Many people suffered loss of employment and destruction of their careers and livelihoods as a result of the crackdowns on suspected communists. Some people were outright imprisoned. A Unitarian congregation in Fort Worth was one of the organizations affected by these accusations, resulting in losses for the congregation. It cut their congregational membership in half. Some states had very severe and even extreme laws against communism, including life imprisonment for subversive propaganda and death penalty for advocating the violent overthrow of the government. Here in Texas, the death penalty for membership in the Communist Party was discussed. During this time, people's loyalties were questioned, and in the end, it was exposing McCarty's insults directed at the Army's general that resulted in a sharp decline in his popularity and in the decline of this political regime. McCarty had gone too far. But the practices of that time have showed up again in the political discourse. Aggressively questioning a person's patriotism, making poorly supported accusations, using accusations of disloyalty to pressure a person to adhere to conformist politics or to discredit an opponent, subverting civil and political rights in the name of national security, and the use of demagoguery, a word that I struggle to pronounce. To me, these practices remind me of my past experiences growing up in Latvia. As many of you know, I grew up in Latvia during the time when it was under Soviet Union regime, the same regime that McCarty was so opposed to. And in that time, well, even all that time, Soviet regime, what it is known for, it is known for suppression of human rights, for violence and fear instilled in people through their secret police organization called Cheka. This organization was so widespread that in my language we have a saying, walls can hear. But what it means is that people could be overheard saying things that the government did not like, and as a result, punished harshly for that. As an intimidation tactic to others, to prevent them from saying anything that would be a threat to the regime, to their tactics and their policies. People were coerced and forced to spy on their friends and their co-workers, and they were punished if they refused to do so. All of these methods were designed to take away people's courage to even question the regime, and there was no legal recourse for people. But all that resistance needed to be done underground. How do people get through 50 years of this occupation for my people? Among the things that helped people to survive was knowing who you can trust, and thus keeping very close family connections. And secondly, courage. Daring to carry the dream of freedom for years and finding allies to carry that dream with you. Courage. Courage in the midst of fear. Because fear is a normal and appropriate response to situations that are dangerous. Any other action and behavior in the midst of dangerous situation without fear is simply recklessness. What we need is courage for the moments when our fears overcome us. Whether these fears are about our political future or any other fears we live with. Fears of losing someone or something, trying new things or entering the unknown. Fear of standing up for ourselves against injustices. Fears of making bad choices. Fear to love because we are afraid to get hurt. Fear of being seen as we are with all our imperfections. Maya Angelou says that courage is the most important of all the virtues, because without courage, you cannot practice any other virtue consistently. You can practice any virtue erratically, but nothing consistently without courage. Courage is a virtue. Just like kindness, patience, compassion, and any other virtue, we are not born with it. We develop it, we grow it. And throughout our lives, we're called to cultivate and grow virtues. And Maya Angelou says further that you develop courage by doing small things. Like just as if you would not want to pick up 100-pound weight without preparing yourself. We practice it. Today we practice our evacuation drill. A way to practice a small step to grow courage, to learn what we would do if, hopefully never, we have to do this. Because if it does happen, it would be easier for us to tap into our courage and go where we need to go. We have so many examples and heroes who show us how to practice courage. We have fairy tales, ancient myths, biblical stories, and movies that tells us about acts of bravery. If you noticed that Pam was playing a lot of pieces from The Wiz today. This is a popular story, The Wizard of Oz, that was written by Frank Baum in the 1900s, in which the cowardly lion finds courage to face his fears. You may be familiar with the story, but if you're not, it is a story about a girl from Kansas named Dorothy. She and her pet dog Toto are swept away by a tornado to a land of Oz, where she learns that the only way to return back is to follow the yellow brick road to the Emerald City and ask the Wizard of Oz for help. On the way to the city, she meets and makes new friends. There's a scarecrow, Tin Woodman, and Cowardly Lion. Turns out all her friends also want something. The scarecrow wants a brain, the Tin Woodman wants a heart, and the lion wants courage. So they all join Dorothy to go and visit the Wizard of Oz. And yes, the Wizard of Oz agrees to help them if they go and kill the Wicked Witch of the West. And this part turns out to be quite an adventurous journey with lots of magic, lots of bravery. But in the end, Dorothy and her friends succeed. And when they return to the wizard, he provides the Scarecrow with a head full of pins and needles, which is the brand new brains. The Tin Woodman gets a silk heart stuffed with the sawdust, and the lion gets a potion of courage. It is their faith in this power that gives these items, these symbolic things, the focus of their desires. The cowardly lion believed that his fear made him inadequate. But what he learned was that courage doesn't mean lack of fear. It is acting in the face of fear, which he did frequently. In fact, he was brave and showed it many times in the midst of danger. We also have heroes in our history, not just imaginary characters who can show us and tell us about courage. One of those is Martin Luther King, probably one of the most highly qualified to talk about courage. On September 20th, 1958, he was at a department store signing copies of his book that recounted the nonviolent resistant fight for the civil rights, when unassuming 42-year-old woman approached him. She plunged a letter opener deep into his chest, so deep, so close to his heart, that the officer who arrived at the scene warned Dr. King not to sneeze, not to even speak. This incident, as well as others, would be enough to scare Dr. King, to instill fear in him. But his philosophy of love allowed him to bypass the bitterness, anger, hate, and resentment that would have tormented many of us. It is through his example that we see a man who stood up to death, and its fear with firmest footing. King was so highly qualified to counsel us how to overcome our fear. As someone who lived and faced fear in his life. These are the words that he wrote. Courage is an inner resolution to go forward in spite of obstacles and frightening situations. We must constantly build dikes of courage to hold back the flood of fear. So step by step, we will move forward together, following the imaginary yellow brick road to find the courage for ourselves, building dikes of courage for everyone in this community. It may take all of us to build the big enough embankment to hold back the flood, but I know we can do it. I believe in you. I believe in us.
Please join me as we say together the words for extinguishing our chalice.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
For the benediction today, words from Sam Trumbore. Go forth in simplicity. Find and walk the path that leads to compassion and wisdom, that leads to happiness, peace, and ease. Welcome the stranger and open your heart to a world in need of healing. Be courageous before the forces of hate. Hold and embody a vision of the common good that serves the needs of all people.